Can you believe we're already approaching the 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time? We're very quickly approaching the end of the liturgical year, and Advent will be upon us within about a month. And in the meantime, we hear the wonderful story of Jesus and Zacchaus. And it's interesting because we follow last week's passage about the proud Pharisee and the humble tax collector, and we hear that the tax collector goes away from the temple justified. Right? It's this humility of heart that brings him into right relationship with the Lord. Well, here we pick up with Zacchaeus, this chief tax collector, and what's interesting is, the name Zacchaeus means righteousness. At this time in Zacchaeus' life, he's certainly not righteous. He's shaken down his brothers and sisters, if you will, for, extra money. And, he's not, his heart isn't right, his life isn't right with the Lord. And yet he's named righteousness. So, there's this bit here about, and this connects with the first reading where God opens the door for grace and mercy for the repentant. He pardons the sinner. Here's this pardoning of this great sinner Zacchaeus as he encounters the Lord. And part of this first piece is Zacchaeus' change of heart and his willingness, his forthright statement that if he has stolen anything from anyone, he will repay it 4 times over. Well, what's interesting is that's part of the ancient Jewish law. That's something that they were supposed to be done. That's something they were supposed to do, is restore what had been taken 4 times over. So Zacchaeus knows the law. He knows what he's responsible for. And you start to see in that willingness to do something different, his own contrition, that open door to the Lord's grace and mercy. So there's kind of these two pieces, that and then also this personal encounter with Jesus. And this, maybe is what we should take most deeply into our hearts. Zacchaeus is open. He's curious. He might even be seeking as he climbs the tree to catch a glimpse of Jesus. But who really initiates that encounter? It is the Lord who looks up and sees Zacchaeus. He knows he's there. He probably knows he's there from the beginning. And as he gets there, he says, I'm going to, Zacchaeus, come down from that tree. Jesus is the one who initiates that encounter. What else does he do? He calls Zacchaeus by name. He calls him by name. He invites him to conversion, and he steps into his house. He invites himself over, when the door has been opened, certainly by Zacchaeus. But, Jesus doesn't go barging in there. He knows Zacchaeus is open to this encounter, this change of life, and so brings that about in him. And, so it is for us and for anyone else who really comes to an encounter with the Lord. Jesus always initiates, the action. He always initiates. He always calls us by name. He always invites us to deeper conversion, to leave our lives behind and come and follow him. And he really tells us his intentions to stay with us, to come into our homes, to come into our hearts. And, I think there's a lot of reflection for us in our own lives, in our own experience with Jesus, but it's also kind of a template for our relationships with other people in terms of, helping them to know the Lord. Certainly, an initiation of encounter with the Lord, an invitation, a calling by name, this personal interaction between them and the Lord. But, we might help facilitate that in our own humanity, in our own relationships. And certainly, along the way, that invitation to conversion and that invitation, that opportunity for the Lord to stay with them, to stay with us over the course of our lives, and really know how deeply transformative the power of Jesus is in our lives when we experience his mercy, when we open the door to the Lord's loving embrace, his loving mercy. That's when our lives are completely transformed. We have the freedom to leave it behind when we know that we have been forgiven, for all that we've done and, all that we have been that's not in line with who we ought to be. So, We take this personal encounter that leads to a transformed heart, and we continue this experience of, the humility leading to an encounter with God's mercy, transformation of life, justification in the Lord, and ultimately living the mission that He has called us to.